I'm Ken McIntosh, Church Growth Coordinator for Southwest Conference of the United Church of Christ. At our annual conference, I interviewed 4 churches that have experienced turnarounds in their congregations. I hope that the ideas in these interviews will encourage you and your congregation to experience positive renewal and growth.
Here with Sharon Luttrell of St. Paul's UCC in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Sharon, tell me a little bit how you came to be part of St. Paul's.
I was invited to come and be a revitalizing pastor for the church, and the search committee had made a decision for themselves that they wanted somebody who would be progressive. The rest of the congregation didn't know. So I came, and my candidating sermon said, well, in order to get past this, we'll have to dig our way out of this claw. You'll have bloody fingernails, you'll be tired, but we'll get there. And 3 months later, I came, and the congregation, I said, okay, so we're going to start changing, and one of the things we have to do is figure out how what do we need to do to change? Do you talk about your church and that sort of thing? And I watched people in the congregation sit back and cross their arms and say, change? Not me.
Oh dear.
So I stayed with the church and was told 2 months after I got there that they shouldn't have called me because they didn't have any money. And 4 months after I got there, John came and did an intervention because the church was unhappy with the direction we were taking. My then moderator had said, I said one day in a meeting, you are asking me to be like a CEO of this congregation and make changes. He said, that's exactly what I want you to do. Very different role than normal pastors play. So he got sick and left. The vice moderator, or the moderator-elect, had charges brought against her for bullying, and she left. And so 4 months after I got there was no leadership. But that's how I came to be there, is that I just, and every day I'd get up and I'd say, there must be a reason I'm still here. God wouldn't have sent me here for any other reason. So,
wow.
yeah.
Quite a start.
It was an interesting one.
What are the signs, let's flip to the positive now. What are the signs now that show that your church is renewing?
Okay, after we had been here for some length of time, the congregation split and split and split. And we started having new people start to come. And word of mouth was spreading. We had a website that people looked at and said they were coming. And they enjoyed it. But we had people who went around and said, no, don't come here. So on the one hand, we were showing growth. On the other hand, we were showing having people that said, please don't come back. However, the people who wanted to renew stayed and supported me. And so between their staying, their supporting, my desire to stay as long as I'd started this, so we started to look at new growth, new ways of doing worship, new kinds of music, more 21st century music as opposed to more 18th century, 19th century music. So that was, I guess those were the things, is that we just started having life in our community. And having that life brought other people who wanted to be part of that.
I think you've already just answered some of this, but what were critical steps? What were stages that led to turnaround, that led in a good direction from that beginning till now?
From the beginning till now. It was the possibility that we had people who in the congregation really wanted to have that happen. That we had people who supported me. That we had people who were willing to put themselves on the firing line to say, this is what we want to do, this is where we're going. And St. Paul's, the old church that was 20 years old, was no longer in existence de facto, because enough of those people had left. And they had been a Presbyterian UCC and a Disciples Church, and all that was left was the UCC. And there was a definite declaration that we were a UCC church. And looking around our conference and looking around other places where I'd been, it just was, you could just see that there was a movement afoot, that this church was going to make it. And it was nice.
There have been a number of well-done and fortuitous things that have happened. Is there one single factor that you could point at and say, this has been the most significant thing that has helped our church to rise again, as it were?
Can I give you something that's gave us freedom? Okay,
Please.
I think that freedom is the thing that's the most important. We owned a 14,000 square foot church building that had been built in the 1980s and had not had any deferred maintenance taken care of. So we had a roof that was not insurable, and we had a Y that was renting space from us. The Y decided to pull out, and we looked for other congregations to come and share space with us, and no one did. But we had one church, a very fundamentalist Bible church, who had a lot of money and said, we'd like to buy your church. And so we had a congregational meeting and talked about it, and we voted to sell the church. And during that meeting, at the end of that meeting, half of the people who were there, which were about 40, half of the people who were there got up and walked out, yelled that I was trying to steal their church, though I don't see any money of it. And so having that money gave us the opportunity, divesting ourselves of the building, and having the money gave us opportunity to move, to regroup, to kind of lick our wounds, as it were, and try to see who we were going to be. And we did a lot of soul searching about what was our goals, what was our mission. We brought somebody in and did planning, a couple of year planning, including to leave the space we were nesting with within 2 years. And we left within 18 months and moved to a space that is the bottom part of a medical building, which is surrounded on 3 sides by glass. We have 2,400 square feet. We bought new chairs. We brought in what we could keep from our old setting and sold most of what was left. We no longer look like a church, but we have church inside of our building. And the people who left wanted a building, an edifice, to say, this is church. And the rest of us knew that church was in our hearts.
So, we're meeting with Pastor Diane Thomas and members of Faith United Community Church in Dewey, Arizona. Would you each please introduce yourself and tell how you became part of the church?
I'm Diane Thomas. I am the pastor at the church, and I started my pastorate there in January of 2011, and have been there ever since. And that's how I came to the church.
I'm Jean Curry Tomlinson, and when I first moved to the country club, I joined the church, and I was a member there for several years, and then I became a Lutheran, and then when I married Dick, I came back to this church because he's a member there.
Okay, my name is Richard Tomlinson, and I've been a member of Faith United Church since about 2006.
What are the signs that showed your church is renewing?
I think the signs that I have seen have to do with the congregation becoming comfortable with who they are, rather than trying to be something they are not, and celebrating the fact that we are an adult congregation, and we still have, not just still, but we have a lot of gifts to offer, and a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of creativity, and we've been able to put that to use, and reaching out into the community beyond just the church.
I think one of the things that shows that we are renewing is how welcoming we are to people that are different than ourselves. We've had young families come in and we loved their children and held their children, and we have a lesbian couple who just fit right in with us. And everybody else, anybody that comes into the door, we worship with them.
And I think one of the reasons why we have such a good flock of people there is our pastor is a very, very good person, and she gives a very good sermon every Sunday. And we have one of the greatest after service luncheons that I think any church can put on.
Do you have that every week? Or?
We have that every week.
What were some of the important decisions that have allowed your church to move forward?
I think a lot of them were not necessarily conscious decisions as much as decisions that sort of evolved among us, that we weren't going to be tied to any one strict form of worship, for instance, or doing it the same way we've always done it before. The congregation is very open to trying new things, and the attitude is that we will try this, and if it doesn't work, that's fine. If it does, then we know that we're on the right track. And so those are things, not being afraid to try to do something different, you know, and I think our congregation, whether that was a conscious decision or not, is something that we've evolved into.
I think because everyone feels welcome, everyone feels like they have something to give. We all have a gift that we are willing to share. Some of us bake cakes and cookies for coffee hour. Some of us serve the communion. People who normally would sit back and let someone else do it because we're a small church and we're so inclusive, everyone does something.
Well, I think when we need something, we bring it in front of our group, and somehow it gets done. Like our grand piano that we was going to get. Well, we asked the congregation to donate to us, and people came up to the plate, and they got us our grand piano. And things like that, you know. We're a small church, but very, very giving. The members are.
This might seem a little redundant, but what do you think is the single most important factor that has kept your church moving in a positive direction?
I think it's the attitude that we can do new things, that we have a lot of life within us, and that there are so many ways for us to give and to share.
So, we're talking to Pastor James Pennington and members of First Congregational UCC Phoenix. So, first of all, if you'd each please introduce yourself and tell how you became part of this church.
Starting this with James Pennington. I am pastor at the church, and I was at a new church start for the last 7 years in Minneapolis. And what attracted me to First Congregational was that the search committee really felt that it was a time to expand and renew, and a time to grow, and a time to really define itself. And it was really ready and in a place that it was willing to change. So for me, there was some trepidation coming from a new church start, because it's very different than with a First Congregational, which is going to be celebrating 100 years. I was a bit worried about that, but it's been good. It's not been without its challenges, but I think we're in a place where we are renewing, a renewed energy, and so that's really what drew me and attracted me to the church.
I'm Becky Johnston, and I started going to First Church because I was looking for a church, and I happened to be singing with a choir that was using that facility, and so I decided that I would try out the service, and immediately liked it, and immediately started singing in the choir, so that kept me there. So I enjoyed just the feel when I walked in the door, that I was very, very comfortable, and very much that I was home.
Hi, I'm Kim Johnston, and I've been going to First Church for about a year and a half. And I started going there because of Becky. I had met her, and she invited me, and I'd been looking for a church through a lot of struggles that I'd had, personal. And she invited me to go to the church, and I was reluctant. And then the next week I decided to go, and I've went for a year and a half every Sunday since. And I felt like it was my second home as soon as I sat down in the pew. It was just comfortable.
What are the signs that you've seen that have been signs of renewal in your church? What have been the good things going on that you've seen happening?
Well, having been there for just over a year, I think some of the signs of the renewing has been an increased energy in worship. I think increased involvement. We've expanded some ministries. And one of the first things that happened is we became an immigrant welcoming church. But I'm just sensing a greater, greater enthusiasm, greater involvement, some really interesting opportunities. The church in its history did not really have it didn't have a mission statement. So I think it's struggled with who it was. So we've developed a mission statement, which is really a powerful mission statement. And there's been a lot of involvement in spiritual development or growth groups on a variety of levels.
I think the things that I've seen that are a reason that our church is renewed more is that there's a lot more people coming with a lot more energy and a lot more excitement to be there. The biggest thing for me, being the team leader for the Sunday school, is the number of children that are now showing up. We've had 4, and now we have 13 on any given Sunday, with more coming on occasion. So I think that's the biggest thing, that there's younger people that are at our church, and just the overall excitement of not only the adults but the children as well.
What have been the important decisions that have allowed your church to renew?
I think the important decisions partly has been looking at our leadership model and working to improve that and find ways to improve the leadership model and communication. We had a moderator, and I think single moderators get really cooked and burned out. We now have 4 moderators, a quad mod. We became immigrant welcoming. We have a mission statement. I think these were decisions the congregation really was active in helping to shape the mission statement. It was quite a long process, but they're really active in being part of that. Then making some decisions to do some ministry. To start to get the congregation outside its doors, I think that's a challenge. And so some of the ministry that we've been doing, like the immigration clinic, sandwiches for homeless folks, the new I Have a Dream closet, boutique, all those things have really been ways, I think, and decisions the congregation says we're opening our doors, we're opening our hearts, and we're opening our minds.
I think a big decision in helping that renewed energy was that when we lost our past full-time pastor retired, we decided to make the right choice and take the time, bring in the interim pastor, and work on what exactly we wanted to see and what we wanted the church to do to go forward. I think it definitely gave us a chance to look at where we were going, what we wanted, and not just jump at the first thing because we didn't have one.
I think that part of the things that have enabled us to renew are that we have brought on the quad mod, the 4 moderators, and that is a huge help to James. And we've enhanced our children's programs and the worship and the music, and just everything is going in a positive light.
So we're here with representatives from First Congregational, UCC, in Prescott, Arizona. Would you please introduce yourselves, each of you, and tell how you became part of this church?
My name is John McCurdy, and I became a part of this church because I was going down the road to work, and Julie, my wife, wanted a community for support.
I'm Pete Norham. I was visiting the town of Prescott with the intention of moving there from the Midwest, and came upon the church, and it happened to be a Sunday, so I attended that time, and a few months later I joined.
My name is Judy Daly, and I moved to Prescott about 6 years ago and spent the next 4 years or so visiting every church in the county, trying to find one that was less conservative than other churches in the area, less patriarchal, less fundamental, and finally found UCC Prescott. That's an open and affirming and welcoming community, and that's how I came to be here.
What are the signs that show that your church is renewing? What are the good signs of life happening at First Congregational in Prescott?
One of the signs that I've noticed is we reviewed our bylaws. And in that process, instead of working the bylaws as something to strive towards, we changed the bylaws into something that reflected what we were doing. And so we are aligning ourselves organizationally as well as actually.
I see renewing as more of a continuing kind of a thing than a one-time example, and that makes it hard to see the signs. And so the signs are probably there, but you really have to look for them and be attuned to what might be happening or not happening, as the case may be.
Since I'm newer to the church, I don't have a lot of the perspective that people who have been there longer, but from what I understand to what I see myself is that this church has come over the period of the last 5 or 6 years from a time of some inner struggle and some conflict to really coming together to work together as a church to be very transparent with each other and very collaborative with one another. And so what I've seen over the last couple of years since I've been there is that sense of collaboration and that sense of oneness and welcome, and also a very strong sense of ownership that we all have a part to play in the church and that there's something here for all of us to do. And so I see a strong sense of that moving through the church, and that spirit of oneness moving through the church. And so I see that from my perspective as a sign of that growth.
What were some important decisions that allowed your church to get to where it is now? What were some things that moved it forward?
I feel, I remember there was a cabinet meeting that we had, and during that cabinet meeting, we decided that instead of focusing on physical growth, that we would change that direction to spiritual growth. And so the focus, an actual decision was made in the cabinet to focus on spiritual growth over physical growth.
I wasn't in on some of the decisions, but with the idea that being renewed is a continuous process to me. The decisions that individuals were making, and therefore their contribution to the congregation, showed that that, as John said, the idea is not counting numbers or counting money, but looking at individual and therefore congregational spiritual growth as far as that's concerned. And we've had a small group that has been a continuous group, and I think that small groups are important to any church, that has continuously been talking about what's new, what is better than the old tradition, or what is at least different, and let us decide as individuals whether it's better or not. And I think that is, the decision to join that group or not to join that group is a decision regarding how you feel about renewal in the church.
And from my perspective, I see the results of each of those. I see the results of the decision made at that point in time that John referred to, focusing on spiritual growth. I see that through the small group that Pete's talking about, and some of the studies that have been offered, and the directions that people have chosen to lead others in study and exploration of progressive Christianity, of lots of different thoughts and understandings, and really opening ourselves up to the conversation about what those things mean and how that impacts us individually and as a congregation. And then some things like deciding to begin a worship ministry team rather than having a more collaborative approach to worship and involving lots of other people and points of view in that process, and to also share the work. And I think that another decision that has been made along the way, and its decision points, is whenever we get to a place where there's something that, even if it's been a tradition, something that we've always done it this way, well, is there anybody who really still wants to do it? Is there anybody volunteering to do it? Is it still really worth doing? Or are we hanging on to something that really nobody's interested in? Is it time to let that go and move on to something else? And so that's a decision that comes up over the course of time, and it's an interesting thing to see. But for the most part, even older people in the church recognize the value of letting go of something like that may not be of value at this point in time, and turning that energy and attention to other things that are of value and of interest to the congregation, or to within the congregation to do for the community, and in missions and in other places as well. So I see that as a key decision point as we're moving through time.